Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the history of Magic the Gathering, where I go set by set, release by release, telling you a little bit about each of the products that Wizards of the Coast has released over the years. Today, I have the second set, the first small set, in the Odyssey block, Torment. Now, it was released on February 8th of 2002, and it had 143 black bordered cards. Its symbol was to represent nightmares, evoking these sort of dark themes within the set. Now, the themes it had were, of course, Graveyard Matters, continuing with what had been established in Odyssey, and Nightmares, a new one, and had the keywords of Threshold and Flashback, and a new one, Madness. Now, Torment was known for the fact that it took a swift variation from normal Magic, that normally when you'd release a set, they would try to balance it out pretty decently between the 5 different colors. Torment focused almost entirely on black. This means there were far more black cards within this set than any other color. It went black, then blue and red had equal amounts but less than that, than what black had, and green and white had less than both of those equal to each other. So you can see it kind of went down with black having far more than any other one. So it had this focus on black throughout the set. This is also to note that when it came to cards in other colors, there was often a theme of black. Either black color, swamps it would mention, some kind of black type ability, or something you might have to play back mana too. So it would talk about black, talk about swamps, all these things that revolved around the usage and the existence of black. It is important that it is noted for its 4-card cycle of lands called the Tainted Lands. Each of them, basically, if you had a swamp out in play, you could tap them for either a black mana or a color of whatever type of land that is tainted. Now, it had a release of 15 cards to a booster pack with the Art of Sengir Vampire on it. Of course, it had 4 pre-constructed decks and a fat pack. The pre-release was on January 25th of 2002, and it had a foil Leclutus Champion in Cyrillic as the promo card, the pre-release card. The novel went along with this was called Chainer's Torment, which is different now. Up until now, for most of the novels, they were actually named after the set. This one varied from that it wasn't named after the actual set. Now, the storyline followed Chainer. Chainer was a Cabal summoner who discovered the Mirari, and using it, he basically rose in power within the Cabal, becoming a rival to the Cabal Patriarch, though then he fell from grace, and he found himself befriending Kamal within the pits, and helped train him in getting into the pit fights. So the two of them bonded over pit fights and became friends there. Sort of on a side note as part of the story, we have Ambassador Leclutus, who has been planning to overthrow the Myr Empire and take it for his own. So that's sort of in the background at the same time. Now, it came to tournament play. This set saw an increase in black decks in tournament play. Of course, it was focused on black, so black gained a huge following within this area. And it's also seen that Madness, the ability that was introduced here, was seen to actually be very overpowered during this time period, during these type of sets. Now, not so much, but at the time, it was seen as an overpowered mechanic. Now, major misprint within the English language of this set is the fact that there was a kind of problem when it came to printing out white cards, that they didn't have the kind of sharpness of others. So there's a kind of graininess to all the white cards because of this printing era when it came to actually just white. Now, as I said, the keywords of Threshold and Flashback, which had been established in the previous set, continued, but it introduced a new keyword, Madness. Madness would activate when you are discarding a card. You could play that card that's being discarded. Effectively, it had a Madness cost, a cost that you would pay when this card is being discarded, to play it instead of when you normally would play it. So, whatever I'm being forced to, or I have to discard this card for whatever reason, I can pay its Madness cost, put it out at that point in time. For non-keyword related material that was introduced, they introduced Nightmares as a big creature type. All the Nightmares had an ability that they had a come into play ability and a leaves play ability. That was what's unique about them within this set. It led to some very interesting combos within the set too. So let's talk about the cycle. There was 6 normal 5-card cycles, 2 4-card cycles and 3 vertical cycles. Let's talk about just the normal 5-card cycles. We, of course, had a cycle of creatures that when they would come into play, if you had Threshold, it had a come into play ability. So it had nothing that would happen if you put it into play, just its normal abilities. But they also had a threshold of if you have the threshold, when this comes into play, something happens. It had a cycle of disorder enchantments. These enchantments, you either would have to discard a card to them or sacrifice them to activate their abilities. It had a cycle of flashback cards where you had to pay both mana and life in order to flash it back. It had a cycle of common madness cards. It also then had a cycle of uncommon madness cards. It had a cycle of dreams. These were rare spells that you would have to discard a number of cards, and their ability of the card would be, of course, scalable based upon the number of cards that you're discarding. Now, for the 2 4-card vertical cycles, there, of course, I mentioned the one of them, the Tainted Lands. These lands, when you put them into play, could either tap for a colorless, or if you controlled a swamp, they would tap for a black, or whatever color mana their tainted type of land. So if it's a Tainted Mountain, taps for a red, etc., etc. And a cycle of possessed creatures. These creatures had a threshold that when you hit the threshold, they become black, they get +1/+1, and gain an ability to destroy creatures of the former color they were. So if it's the green possessed creature, could destroy green things. Now the vertical cycles were first a vertical cycle of black dreams. This cycle included the rare black dream in another cycle. So there's this rare black dream that's in 2 different cycles. There was an uncommon and common black dream to go along with this rare one, making it sort of like black had its own version of dreams that was a part of its own cycle. So 2 types of dream cycles. 1 card that's in both of those. It also had a vertical cycle of Punisher spells. A cycle of red spells which targeted an opponent with 2 unfavorable effects, usually one of which is damage. Now, it did have a mirrored parallel of the strengths, which gave bonuses to power and toughness, and then would offer protections against the opposition color of the other strength. Now, this card set did have 1 reprint in Dracovin Empire, actually, reprinted here. So for the 4 pre-constructed decks, there was a white-black called Sacrifice, a blue-black called Grave Danger, a black-red called Walking Nightmare, and a black-green called Insanity. Now let's talk about some of the cards. There was Ambassador Liquetus. I'm never going to pronounce his name correctly, but regardless, he was a 1/3 that for 3 mana, you could have target player put the top 3 cards of their library in their graveyard. So just keep paying mana, keep basically milling away at an opponent's deck. Balthor the Stout. Other barbarian creatures get +1/+1. You could also pay a red to give another barbarian +1/+0 until end of turn. Cobalt Coffers. For 2 colors and tapping it, you add 1 black mana to your mana pool for each swamp you control. This is actually a must for a straight black deck. If you have a lot of swamps, Cobalt Coffers is really good if you can get it out at the right time. Cobalt Ritual. You add 3 black mana to your mana pool. But if you have Threshold, you add 5 black mana to your mana pool. Pretty good, that one. Chinger, Dementia Master. All nightmares get +1/+1. For 3 black and paying 3 life, you could take a creature card from your graveyard and put it into play. It becomes black and gains Nightmare in addition to its other types. But should Chainer leave play, you exile all Nightmares. Good for a Nightmare deck, but you have to be watchful of keeping Chainer alive. Cleansing Meditation. You destroy all enchantments, but it has a threshold that, instead, you destroy all enchantments, and then you return all enchantments placed into your graveyard from play in this way back into play. So you basically get rid of everything, return yours. Hypnox. It's an 8/8 flying nightmare. When it comes into play, target opponent exiles all the cards in their hand. If Hypnox leaves play, those cards return to that opponent's hand. Insist. The next creature spell you cast cannot be countered. Prevents countering of the next creature, and you draw a card. Krosan Restorer. You can tap it to untap a land. Or if you have Threshold, it taps to untap 3 lands. Last Laugh. When a permanent is put in the graveyard in play, each creature and player takes 1 damage. So permanents go away, everything takes damage. If there are no creatures in play, you sacrifice Laugh. Laugh. Laowen, Cephalid Empress. When she comes into play, Each opponent returns all blue creatures they control to their hand, and opponents then cannot cast blue creatures as long as she's in play. So basically it shuts down all other blue decks. Major Tero, a 2/3 flyer that for 3 colorless, 2 white, you can sacrifice him, exile all black creatures. Morning Tide, remove all creature cards from all graveyards from the game. So you basically wipe out graveyards if it's got a lot of creatures. Mutilate, all creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn for each swamp you control. So 4 swamps, -4/-4. It builds up and makes it that you basically wipe out everything. Organ Grinder, you can tap and exile 3 creature cards from your graveyard to have target opponent lose 3 life. Parallel Evolution, for each token that is in play, its controller puts a copy of that token into play. So basically, you double all the tokens that are in play. If you're playing the only token-heavy deck, guess what? You double all yours. And for 4 colorless and 3 green, you can flash this card back. Plagiarize, until end of turn. If target player would draw a card, instead they do not draw a card, and you draw a card. Radiate, you cast this on an instant or sorcery that targets one target, a single permanent or player. For each other possible target that spell could affect, you create a copy of that spell to target that target. So if you're targeting a player, all players get a target. If you're targeting an opponent, all opponent. If it's a creature, all creatures. You effectively radiate to everything this spell could possibly affect. Retraced Image, you reveal a card from your hand, and if it shares a name with a card in play, you can put it into play. Interesting one with that one. Transcendence, you don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. You lose the game for having 20 or more life. If you would lose life, for every 1 life you would lose, you instead gain 2 life. So basically counteracts loss of life and gives you life gain instead. And finally, Zombie Trailblazer. You can tap a zombie to turn target land into a swamp until end of turn, and you can tap a zombie to give target creature Swamp Walk until end of turn. So with 2 zombies and Zombie Trailblazer, you basically make something a swamp, give something else Swamp Walk, and go and murder your opponent with said now Swamp Walk creature. Of course, you have to tap zombies to the Zombie Trailblazer, but zombie deck, anybody? So that's it for today. I introduced you to Torment, an interesting take on Magic as they experimented with focusing on one color. This is something that we don't see a lot in Magic, this focus. Normally they basically break even between all the sets. They've experimented with other things before, but this is the time where we see them first, coming up with this major experiment in color balance, which they did quickly correct when it came to this block, because they saw that they were focusing too much on this, bringing too much into one color. It fit with the themes of what was going on, especially because graveyard themes were very strong throughout all of Odyssey, so it made sense in a way. But it also did cause many effects that were different than what they wanted. Madness proved to be very powerful at the time. So this set has very interesting notes to it when we look to it as the historical aspects of it. But in the long run, it's hard to say what real effects it had on Magic, other than a lesson learned. But regardless, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows you for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon. Link description below. If you want to check out some other great Magic the Gathering content, I can recommend Card Bazaar, They Said, We Said, and Tasty Snackies, my friends of the multiverse. Great people. I recommend checking out their stuff. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.